Okay, let's look at question 2b. Describe the changes in the number of tourists visiting the top 3 categories of attraction in Singapore from 1970 to 2010 as shown in figure 4. And figure 4 is your compound bar graph. Okay, the command word here for the question is describe. So box out the word describe. What is the meaning of the word describe here? Okay, the examiner would expect you to state the overall trend. The examiner would also expect you to quote data from figure 4. Okay, let's move on to identifying the keywords. Okay, the first keyword here is changes. So changes in the number of tourists, it can either increase or decrease. Okay, and then the next keyword is top 3 categories. Okay, 3 categories of attractions, and these are the 3 categories of attractions that the question is referring to. Okay, what is the time period? The time period is from 1970 to 2010. Okay, very quickly, let's move on to looking at figure 4. Figure 4 on the x-axis shows the time period 1970, 1990 and 2010, and the y-axis shows the number of tourists, and it's important to take note that the number of tourists is in thousand. And later on when you write your answer, you have to include this unit in your answer. This is a 3 marks question. It means you have to give 3 points for this question. Okay, the first point is for you to identify the overall trend. From 1970 to 2010, you realize that the tourist number in thousand have increased over the years. 1970, you see that there are 100,000 tourists. 1990, you see that there is 140,000 tourists. And 2010, you see that there are 170,000 tourists. So overall, from 1970 to 2010, you see an increase in the number of tourists. Okay, and the increase is by 70,000. That is point number 1, and you get 1 mark for that. After identifying the overall trend, you move into the 3 categories. Okay, we can look at the first category, which is mice. So point number 2, mice. Mice attraction. For mice attraction, again from 1970, you see that there is about 50,000 tourists going to mice attraction. 1990, it decreases to 30,000, and then 2010, it decreases further to 10,000. Right, so from 1970 to 2010, you actually see a decrease in the number of tourists visiting mice attractions. Okay, and the number of tourists that decrease is by 40,000. And that will be your second mark. let's move on to the other categories, which is cultural heritage attractions. So how do you look at the number of tourists who visited cultural heritage attraction? Okay, let's look at 1970 cultural heritage attraction. Okay, you see that this is 90,000 tourists, but because this is a compound bar graph, you have to find the difference. 90 minus 50, which is 40,000. In 1970, there are 40,000 tourists visiting cultural heritage attractions. In 1990, you will do the same thing. 90,000 tourists, and then you find the difference, which is 60,000. And then 2010, likewise, you will do the same thing. 80,000, and you find the difference, which is 70,000. So you realize that over the years, the number of tourists visiting cultural heritage attractions have increased. Okay, and increased by 30,000. Okay, that is point number 3. So let's put down point number 3. Cultural heritage attraction, which is from 1970 to 2010, you see an increase in the number of tourists visiting cultural heritage attraction, and then the increase is by 70 minus 40,000, which is an increase by 30,000 tourists. That will be your third mark. Okay? First, let's look at the last category, which is your fourth point. Resort and casino. So again, you have to calculate the difference because this is a compound bar graph. 1970, you have 100,000 people minus 90. Okay, so the difference here, there are 10,000 people who visited resorts and casino. 1990, you have 140 minus 90, which is 50,000 people visiting resorts and casino. And 2010, you have 170 minus 80, which is 110 people visiting resort and casino. So over the years, you also see that the number of people visiting resort and casino has increased. So let's write down your point number 4. Okay. From 1970 to 2010, there is increase in number of tourists visiting resorts and casino, and the increase is by 100,000. Okay, there are more than enough points for you to score 3 marks. You just need to give any 3 of the points listed here.